What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles in the Open Great League with a Pokemon that most of you probably completely forgot was buffed this season with Rotom Mow form, which gained access to Leaf Storm, which if you didn't know is a grass type clone of Overheat, and well previously this Pokemon's biggest issue was that it literally did not have any grass type moves, so this is a pretty substantial upgrade. Now unfortunately if you want to run a cheaper energy charge move, you have to run Ominous Wind, which is just a really bad move. Also I do not recommend this team at all. Initially, I tried Wormadam just to squeeze in a second buffed Pokemon, but unfortunately, it was awful. And then I swapped it out for Hisuian Electrode for that ABB-style Grass Electric duo, which was a little bit better, but I was getting shut down by all sorts of Dark types, but especially Guzzlord, which seems to be a lot more popular again over the past few days. Either way, there's still plenty of entertaining battles, despite the fact that this team didn't perform exceptionally well. And with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Do you think the other Rotom forms could do with a buff, and if so, how would you buff them? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Starmie into Florges. Now, this is going to be an awkward matchup. They are very likely to be on Trailblaze. However, are they actually going to throw it here? I'm going to shield the first charge move. The opponent going to bait with a Chilling Water, which is not ideal. But I'm now going to look to overfarm, fire off a Surf, and despite the fact that I'm debuffed, Shadow Starmie still puts in work, and it threatens a shield. And now I'm going to swap Catch the next move onto Rotom, where this time they do end up going for a Trailblaze. Unfortunately, they do hard punish with a Shadow type Typhlosion, but we reach a Leaf Storm, and Leaf Storm is resisted damage, but honestly, it would do so much there. So the opponent uses the final shield, and of course, they now have a lot of energy. They're one away from back-to-back Thunder Punches. They fire off the first one, and so I'm going to look to overfarm and throw a Surf just before they reach Thunder Punch number 2. Surf gets the KO, but they're going to have more Peko in the back. That is not ideal. I tried to catch a charge move there. It does not work out, as the opponent, honestly, probably committing to a full farm down, but they fire off the Chilling Water, and Wormadam is reasonably bulky here, so I'm able to tank that very comfortably, and now go for a Bulldoze. Bulldoze, not the hardest hitting move, but it does get the KO, and the opponents cannot go for an Aura Wheel, as of course, I am a ground type Wormadam here. The opponent goes for Psychic Fangs number 1. I'm trying to reach the Bug Buzz, but unfortunately, I end up losing CMP. Of course, Aura's already debuffed. A Bulldoze would not get the KO, but I do force their energy. We come back in with the Shadow Starmie, and I'm able to reach the Surf. Shadow Starmie gets the KO up against the Peko, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there, obviously not the best showcase of Rotom there, but into the next battle, we're going to see Shadow Starmie into Clodsire. Now, the opponent is going to be swapping into Azumarill. I am resisting the bubble damage here, so I'm going to swap out and look to catch a Play Rough. If I swapped out a bit sooner there, then the opponent can just go straight Ice Beam, and it does become a little bit of an awkward matchup for the Rotom, whereas now, of course, we can just full send a Leaf Storm, and Leaf Storm is easily going to take out the Azumarill. They come back in with the Clodsire, and Rotom's still not done, going to reach a second Leaf Storm. Now, remember, each time you throw it, it is going to debuff your attack stat by 2 stages, so it doesn't hit quite as hard up against the Clodsire, but still respectable damage. Now, I'm going to just tank the energy onto my Wormadam as they go straight for a Stone Edge there. I will probably shield the next one, but I am resisting the Fast Food pressure. So I'm going to shield the next one here as the opponent is going to go for a second Stone Edge. That wouldn't quite get the KO there, but it would put me very deep in the red health range. I'm now going to fire off the Bulldoze. Bulldoze doesn't quite get the KO, so just to be sure, I snipe with the Shadow Starmie, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Wigglytuff. But we are just so far ahead on energy, the opponent actually choosing not to shield the first charge move. It wouldn't make a difference, as I would have reached 2 more anyways, but because they didn't shield, I sideway farm them all the way down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. Really big issue for the team here, as they are leading with a Morgrem, but we're going to swap out, and do they know about Leaf Storm? Leaf Storm one-shots a Shadow Diggersby from full health, but I don't know if that necessarily really helps me, because Morgrem is still going to be an absolute nightmare for me to deal with. I've got a Psychic type, which I definitely can't bring in, but then I've got a Sucker Punch user, and Morgrem is a Dark and Fairy. It is double resisting my Fast Food pressure. That is really not ideal. And that's something I want to say, Wormadam, especially with the Sucker Punch, it just felt like every time I used it, it was just being hard-walled by every possible thing we can imagine. If I was on Bug Bite here, it would hit for neutral damage. It honestly would not be that bad. But just to make things worse, the opponent gonna catch a Bulldoze onto Empoleon, recognizing that the Morgrem is going to be their win condition. However, I end up dropping their defense. Is that going to allow Starmie to get the full farm down here? It's gonna be super close. Shadow Starmie just barely not able to get that farm down. If we get the farm down, honestly, honestly, we've still got a shield in play, we've still got a lot of HP, I get to back-to-back surfs, and potentially that is enough damage to get the KO. However, of course, Morgrem is reasonably bulky, maybe it wouldn't quite take them out there. Either way, we're not going to find out, as that did not happen, so GG's to that trainer. We're into the next battle, and this trainer, I recognize their in-game name straight away, because it is just a bunch of capital I's, I think, or L's, I actually don't know. But either way, I remember they were running this exact toxic team that I recently made a sort of troll video on, and I remembered I do not want to lose to this team here. However, I realized this is a bit awkward for me. I don't really have much play into fight. My only win condition is the zero shield scenario, and the opponent does not fight for switch advantage, and that is a big mistake on their end, because now we can come back in with the Shadow Starmie, which of course doesn't exactly have a great matchup into Wigglytuff, but I know that my Rotom is going to be much better into Jellicent. However, the opponent, even though I knew the team there, is going to make a catch of the Surf onto Jellicent. I'm now going to come in with the Rotom. Unfortunately, they do snipe with the Hex damage, but at this point, we're just going to shield, and we're going to look to overfarm. The opponent fires off a Surf Bait there, which is quite interesting on their end, but we can now just go straight for an Ominous Wind, and whilst this probably doesn't quite get the KO, it does force the final shield. But I do still have to be wary here. I'm going to no-shield. This is just another Surf, as I realize, of course, Wigglytuff does have a charge move loaded. They fire off the Icy Wind. I'm 2 away. Well, I'm going to go for 2 Thunder Shocks here. Go for a Leaf Storm. Leaf Storm, gonna get the KO despite being debuffed, and now I'm triple debuffed, which means Ominous Wind. I don't know if that would KO, but I'm able to reach a last-second Leaf Storm. Leaf Storm gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle, Shadow Starmie into Togekiss. So we are going to resist the typical charge moves here, but pegs are going to add up quite a lot. So I'm going to no-shield the first charge move here. I'm going to go for a Surf. If they end up shielding, I will then eventually swap out, because honestly, I don't trust that I can live the peg damage to reach another charge move. Yeah, I definitely won't be able to, so I swap into my Rotom, and the opponent is going to fire off a second charge move. I'm going to shield this. The opponent going to go for an Aura Sphere, and the opponent is unfortunately not quite in range where I can fully farm them down. So farm up to back-to-back Ominous Winds, I throw on CMP, I get the KO, and they're going to come in with a Swampert. Now, of course, I am loaded, and I finally have Grass-type coverage. We are full sending. Leaf Storm is unfortunately shielded by the opponent. I'm now going to swap out. I tried to catch a charge move there. Didn't work out, as they didn't throw straight away, so actually probably could have just stayed in and fired off a second Leaf Storm. So that's actually what I'm going to try to do here. I'm still 1 away. The opponent goes for the extra fast move. We win CMP once again. Leaf Storm gets the KO there. But their final Pokemon is a Mandibuzz, and that is really not ideal for me. We've only got Wormadam in the back, which is going to massively struggle. If they've got Aerial Ace, it's already game over. I'm going to no-shield the first charge move here just to see what they throw, but they actually go for a Shadow Ball. You can see we are very tanky. We can tank 2 Shadow Balls pretty comfortably. I'm going to no-shield the next one here. I was hoping maybe they would go for a Foul Blade, deal less damage, but nope, that is not the case. Either way, I'm going to fire off the Bug Buzz here. Bug Buzz is at least neutral, and it does respectable damage there, but it does not drop their defense. Can I outpace them to the next charge move? It's going to be close, but no, unfortunately, just barely outpacing. I think Bulldoze as well probably wouldn't KO anyways, as it is double resisted, but either way, GG's to that opponent there. I believe after that battle, I was like, yep, I am just way too weak to like dark types and flying types. So we're going to go for Electrode, which is going to be a little bit better into, say, a Mandibuzz, for example. But either way, we're going to see Altaria in the lead. We full send the Ice Beam. I'm able to grab a shield advantage. At this point, I'm happy to just let the Starmie go down. Sky Attack, going to get the KO there. We can now come in with the Electrode, and I'm hoping I have put them into range where a Wild Charge will KO, but I'm actually not entirely certain that is the case just yet. So I'm going to shield there, expecting a Flamethrower. They do bait with a Sky Attack, but that's okay. We've got back-to-back charge moves. Wild Charge gets the KO, and the opponent's going to come in with Empoleon. That is a strange decision, but I'm going to go for a second Wild Charge. Wild Charge should be grabbing the final shield, and now I swap into my Rotom. The opponent is going to be firing off a charge move. I don't need to shield the first, as the opponent is just going to go for a Drill Peck. They are now going to look to throw the next charge move, and I'm still just going to look to overfarm as much as I can. The opponent is eventually going to swap out. They swap into Azumarill, but we've got Leaf Storm, and Leaf Storm gonna hit like an absolute truck. It near one-shots Azumarill. We get the full farm down. We come out with a second Leaf Storm already loaded, and up against Empoleon from this range, it easily gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. We're going to see Wigglytuff in the lead. So, the opponent's going to swap out straight away. And unfortunately, Guzzlord was an absolute nightmare for this team. You're not going to see too many battles up against it because I think I lost against every single one. But I faced a ton of Guzzlord. Unfortunately, I had a really rough day with this team. But either way, we're going to try and fight this out anyways, as the opponent is going to fire off another brutal swing here. We can hit for neutral damage with the Swift. Unfortunately, it just really doesn't do that much damage here. Honestly, might even be better off going for wild charges instead, just because it is going to hit slightly harder, and I can't really put them into range where I can Psywave farm them down, as Psywave is going to be double resisted. But we come back in with the Shadow Starmie, I fire off a Surf just before they reach the next brutal swing, and you know what, maybe I can go for a full farm down here. It's going to be super close, but we're going to commit to it anyways. Starmie just barely getting that farm down, that is huge, but they're going to come in with a Licky Licky, and unfortunately it's not looking too good for me. Now the opponent's going to swap out. I tried to swap there, it doesn't go through. I should have just committed to throwing a Surf there, and unfortunately that should now be game over. My only win condition is full sending Leaf Storm. Leaf Storm is going to be shielded, and just like that, it's going to be game over. The opponent goes for Icy Wind, super effective damage, it gets the KO, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's opponent into the next battle, another Wigglytuff in the lead. So again, we are just going to play out this lead matchup here. The opponent is going to be staying in, and they can actually just 2-shield and fully farm me down, which I'm not really looking forward to if that's going to be the case, but they do end up throwing some energy. So I'm just going to no-shield this. I believe I played out the sort of 2-0 shield scenario where they don't throw a charge move, and I survive with 1 HP and a Dream to get off a second Surf, whereas of course, if they throw the charge move, I lose that 1 HP, and potentially I wouldn't actually get to that second charge move there. So I didn't want to risk it. Instead, gonna come in with the Electrode, bait with a Swift, which was quite risky there, but now we can go for the Wild Charge, and Wild Charge will finally get the KO. They're gonna come in with Corviknight, and the opponent going to swap and catch onto Quagsire. Nice play on their end, as Wild Charge is resisted damage, but now we can just swap straight away into Rotom. We can actually get to a Leaf Storm at the same pacing as a Stone Edge. A Leaf Storm, massive overkill, but it gets the one shot. They come back in with the Corviknight, and of course, I'm now double debuffed, and I don't have an electric type charge move. I'm actually happy just to let the opponents get to back-to-back moves here and just fully sacrifice this thing. That way, we can come back in with the Electrode. I still have my shield in play, and whilst they will just barely outpace me, it doesn't make a difference. I can safely shield up the Air Cutter, go straight for the Wild Charge, and of course, super effective damage. Wild Charge gets the KO finally up against the Corviknight, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into next battle. We're going to see Shadow Starmie into Annihilate. So this is going to be a positive matchup for me. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into a Shadow Drapion, but because they stayed in just for a brief period of time there, I'm able to outpace to a Surf and dealing huge damage in the process. I'm going to swap out there, catch a Crunch onto my Electrode, and that doesn't quite put me into range where they can fully farm me down. However, to deal any damage, I have to full send a Wild Charge, and so I go for the Wild Charge. The opponent doesn't commit to the farm down. Looks like maybe they just barely would miss out there, so I'm happy with that. We now come back in with the Shadow Starmie. We have a shield advantage. We're going to deal a lot of fast pressure, and their final Pokemon is going to be Empoleon. So at this point, I'm not even going to bother going for the Leaf Storm here. All I need to do is put Empoleon into range where I can farm them down with the Starmie. What I don't want to do is take them out here and allow them to farm me down with the Annihilate there, because if they get to multiple charge moves, that could be very tricky for the Starmie. So instead, we throw on CMP and we put them at literally 1 HP and a Dream. That is best case scenario for me, as we get the Psywave farm down. Annihilate is not going to reach 3 charge moves. I've still got 2 shields in play, so I can just safely shield up the Rage Fist, commit to a full farm down. The opponent not going to bother throwing a second move there. They realize it's game over, and so I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent is the next battle. We're going to see Talonflame in the lead. So, a great lead matchup for me, but unfortunately, that is ruined immediately as they swap into a Guzzlord. Now, they've actually farmed up to a Sludge Bomb, so I'm going to shield. They actually full sent a Dragon Claw, so good news that they're not on the Sludge Bomb there. Either way, we shielded up the harder hitting charge move there, which is quite nice for us. Still doesn't necessarily help me out all that much because Swift's still not really dealing that much damage. But they fire off the Brutal Swing. I'm going to try and reach 2 more Swifts here, but if they do throw straight away, I believe they do have the energy for the next Brutal Swing already, which isn't ideal. At this point, we have to just let it go down. And now I'm going to come in with the Rotom, and unfortunately, they're still going to reach another charge move, but again, just another Brutal Swing. I have to no-shield this. They swap back into the Talonflame, so I'm going to come in with the Shadow Starmie and fire off the Surf before they get to a charge move. Surf, gonna connect, it gets the KO, they come back in with the Guzzlord, and I go straight for another Surf. At this point, the opponent likely just invests both shields into their final Pokemon, which they're going to do, and unfortunately for me, it's a Wigglytuff, which means there is just literally nothing I can do there, and so I concede the match. But GG's to opponent there into the next battle because he's Shadow Magnezone in the lead. That is not a great matchup for me, but I'm going to take one Volt Switch, get off a few fast moves, and then swap into my Electrode where they're going to throw some energy and they full send a Wild Charge, which doesn't really make an awful lot of sense at all because that is double resisted by Hisuian Electrode. But that's fine with me. We go for Wild Charge, dealing big damage, and this should actually be a CMP tie here with the Sky Attack. Swift is, of course, not going to hit nearly as hard as the Wild Charge, but we end up grabbing a shield. So, not going to complain. Instead, we're going to come in with the Shadow Starmie, and they did throw pretty much straight away there, so I can come in and I can look to overfarm, but I don't want to take too much damage from the Dragon Breaths, so eventually I will fire off the Surf. Surf gets the KO. This time, I'm not taking the Volt Switch damage, instead swapping into our Rotom after just a couple of Psy Waves. Again, I can still no shield. This time, they go for Mirror Shot. Mirror Shot does not get a debuff there, so I'm going to go for the Ominous Wind. Ominous Wind is going to grab the final shield. This one, I probably should start shielding, so going to shield here as they go for another Mirror Shot. Again, they don't get the debuff, so Ominous Wind, I'm hoping this will get the KO here. It just barely doesn't, but the opponent swaps out into Shadow Quagsire. But unfortunately for them, we now have Grass-type coverage on our Rotom Mow, so I'm going to shield the Alcatel. I'm going straight for Leaf Storm, and of course, this probably kills like 3 or 4 Quagsires. It gets the one shot. We Thunder Shock, farm down the Magnezone, and I'm able to take that game. Actually, if anyone wants to go to PvPoke and check just how much damage a Leaf Storm does up against a Shadow Quagsire, you're more than welcome to do so and post in the comments. But into the next battle, and a Pokemon that I just didn't really think about, but Bug-Bite Fortress just completely shuts down the entire team. They swap into Unova and Stunfisk. I don't have Energy Ball. There's no point playing that out. GG's to that trader. We get absolutely destroyed in that battle. But into the next battle, we're going to see a Florges in the lead. So this time, I'm actually going to swap out straight away to catch the Charge Move here, and the opponent is going to go for the Trailblaze immediately. So happy to catch the Charge Move there. They likely go for a Chilling Water this time around. Either way, don't really care. Both moves are resisted. They debuff my attack stat, but now I'm just going to look to overfarm massively. I farm up to back-to-back Wild Charges. First one doesn't quite KO, but they swap into Galarian Moltres, and we've already got a second one loaded. So Wild Charge number 2 grabs the first shield. Now I'm actually going to come in with my Shadow Starmie because I can probably grab the final shield with a Surf and then just swap into my Rotom and start dealing super effective fast move pressure with the Thunder Shocks. Now, of course, I've only got resisted charge moves. However, by the time I throw a Leaf Storm, it probably would be enough damage to KO. The opponent tries to catch a charge move there. We weren't actually at the Leaf Storm just yet, so that backfires, but they're going to come in with a Corviknight. And again, we don't have any electric type coverage here, but Ominous Wind gets a boost, and that's going to mean, first of all, I live the Air Cutter a lot more comfortably now, but also my Thunder Shocks are dealing more damage. Still not doing huge damage here, but either way, that's fine. We can go for another Ominous Wind. Ominous Wind, gonna connect, and I believe the opponent is likely gonna swap back into the Moltres at this point, so I'm gonna shield, gonna go straight for Leaf Storm, and this is resisted damage, but I'm boosted. Leaf Storm takes out the Galarian Moltres. I swap into Shadow Starmie. I can just Side Wave, farm them all the way down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's to opponent there into, I believe, the final battle of this video, and Morpeko was another Pokemon that I saw very often in the lead and dealt a lot of troubles to me, but either way, we're going to swap into Electrode. I tried to catch a charge move. They end up going for a Psychic Fangs anyway, so I guess that's fine with me. I'm going to go for, well, I was about to throw a Swift there. I'm very fortunate that I didn't, as the opponent swaps into a Frostlass. Now, I can reach back-to-back Wild Charges here, and so I might as well just throw them both. Wild Charge number 1 was no shielded. Second one is going to be shielded, but of course, they get a hefty Powder Snow farm down, and they come out with a Shadow Ball loaded. I'm going to shield the Shadow Ball there, going to look to go for the full farm down, and then I look to try and catch another charge move onto my Rotom, and again, the opponent, very disciplined, holding onto the energy, but again, I don't need to shield a Psychic Fangs there. The opponent gonna fire off the Psychic Fangs and then look to swap and catch a move onto Diggersby. Now we saw up against a Shadow, this Leaf Storm one-shots them, but the opponent is gonna shield this time around. We still reach another one, but I'm now double debuffed here. So Leaf Storm still does big damage, but unfortunately not enough to get the KO. Now, Fire Punch easily takes us out from that range, and here I make a huge mistake. I just needed to throw the charge. I was like, okay, that's just another Fire Punch. Nope, it's a Scorching Sands. I forgot that Mud Shot now generates energy faster again, and so I lose that final game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.